In today's episode, we are back delving into the property buying journey. To help me uncover everything we're not taught about the property buying process, I'm joined with Tanvi Shah, a lifestyle, career and sports creator, to delve into her property journey and how she found the process. Hello, Tanvi. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
I'm excited. I've listened to it loads of times, so I'm honoured to be a guest on it now.
No, I love it. I mean, we're in the studio, you're wearing your slippers. Very wise decision. Very wise. I'm envious of you.
I'm just at the age where like comfort is key,
Yeah.
and I'm not about to wear heels for no reason.
Of
So
course.
yeah, we're getting cozy today.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think I'm going to start doing that. And I'm just going to be like, sorry, guys.
Normalise slippers in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I know you very well, but please introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Yeah, so my name is Tanvi. I actually started my career within banking and finance. I qualified as a chartered accountant on my graduate scheme at a big four firm. And then I did a 180, like a lot of people seem to be doing these days. And I quit my corporate job to become a full-time content creator, a presenter, and also a founder, an accidental founder of two businesses. Yeah. So yeah, that's where we are today.
Amazing. And how have you found the journey from working for one of the big four to now just being a full-time content creator?
Yeah, it's definitely been a really long process. It's not something that I just went from A to B and it was seamless overnight.
Yeah.
I was doing sort of both the roles in parallel to one another, but I guess it just got to the point where if you want to elevate one of them, there has to be a trade-off and something has to give. So once I made the decision, honestly, the last year and a half now has been crazy.
Been a year and a half already?
It's been a year and a half and it's gone like this, but when I think about how much I've been able to achieve and do with the amount of time I've been able to get back for myself, it's been incredible. And the amount of doors that being self-employed has opened for me, I just never thought I'd be where I am now in such a short space of time.
Yeah, well, you should be so proud of yourself. One, because you've blown up. Whenever I'm on my For You page, you come up, you're like every other video.
I'm really sorry about that.
We get this as a great content creator. Like, I'm literally like, I just need my videos to look like Tanvi's. So you've got that. Then you've also obviously founded two communities and you've also just bought a property with your boyfriend.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot going on.
It's crazy, isn't it? What journey you've been on.
Yeah, and I feel like everything good has happened at once for me. This year has been incredible and I'm really grateful. But it also means that there's been a very long to-do list at all times of the day.
So I guess let's strip it back. What actually inspired you to start sharing content online?
So I actually started my content creation journey when I was still in the corporate world. And I guess when I was starting my graduate scheme, there wasn't that much information online about, you know, what is the big four really like? You know, you always see it on careers fairs or on the websites, but you never really heard a true perspective from a graduate themselves.
Yeah.
So I started sharing my journey online, you know, balancing my full-time job with the ACA, which is the professional qualification. That was really tough to do 15 exams along work. But also, you know, like the work-life balance, the long hours. In audit, we have something called busy season, and those would end up being, you know, 12 to 15-hour days. Wow. And then also the added dimension of being a woman of colour in the corporate world. Again, I feel like that experience wasn't shared enough. So it sort of became my outlet and my form of therapy to deal with some of the work stresses I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And because there weren't that many people doing that at the time, I think it resonated with a lot of people, a lot of women that look like me especially. And that's sort of how I began to grow.
Oh, wow. And like I said, your every other video on my For You page. I love your Instagram content as well. And I just love that there's such a great variety of content, right? But I'm keen to get to know you a little bit better, as well as I'm sure my audience are too. So one of my first questions for you is, what's your guilty pleasure when it comes to spending money?
Mine has been and always will be like fashion.
Okay.
Clothes, bags, shoes. I've done it from the age of 4.
Oh,
honestly,
gosh.
my parents have stories of me going to mother care and like sneaking off and putting like the Barbie bikini into the trolley. So it's something that I have tried to get rid of, but it's just an innate part of my personality.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I love fashion. I'm obviously a lifestyle creator as well. So now I can kind of justify it being part of my job.
Yeah.
But definitely as I've grown up, you know, my spending habits have changed. I've definitely become a more conscious consumer, but I just absolutely love fashion.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I think a lot of women do. A lot of women listening to the podcast probably resonate with that. And I guess when you're creating content, again, we are conscious consumers. I'm not going to say we're not, but I feel like you're conscious of having to like maybe wear different outfits every time you film, or you want to switch up your style. I don't know. Do you feel the same?
100%. There is that pressure when you're in front of a camera or you're
Yeah.
constantly attending events, red carpet. I do a lot of like presenting work, and you have to always have something new on, which is really sad, but it is actually the reality. At the same time, I think the older I've gotten, like I've learned that like the capsule wardrobe is the way forward, and buying good quality items that last longer, definitely in terms of like finances, is 100% more economically beneficial for you. But it is tough, and I've definitely shifted away from being such a fashion forward led creator for that reason, because whenever it's a new season, you will see like autumn fits, winter fits, like all of that already. And I really did struggle, because a lot of the time you're having to put in an order, create the content, send the clothes back, and that just isn't something that I sort of agree with or want to do. So I think that has led me to take a step away from being such a fashion creator, but then I create content about all the stuff I've just spoken about, and I think that's the direction we're moving in anyway, where it's like de-influencing trends, and I love that.
Yeah, no, I like that too. And I guess a second question I have for you is, what has been your greatest financial achievement?
Well, it's probably something we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about today, but it is buying my first home. So I bought my first property we completed in June this year. And that is by far like the best and biggest financial achievement that I have done to this day.
And would you say you've always had the goal of being a homeowner?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely dabbled into the idea of renting, just because, it would be cool to try and live in different places or different countries. And I haven't ever closed that option. But for me, I've always looked at the idea of owning a home as something that I've been working towards for the last few years. Having a place that I can call my own, like a safe space that I can truly put my own Tanvi touch on. I've always loved the idea of that.
And to be honest, with the content you do share, I have seen glimpses of your home, and it does look stunning. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've seen a few flats with my mum this year, and I'm like, it is just not the vibe I'm going for. And then I've seen yours, I'm like, that is it.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. So we're working a little bit harder to save a bit more money so I can afford a property like that.
Yes.
And I guess obviously, like you mentioned, it's been your greatest financial achievement. But I'm sure a lot of people listening probably aren't either anywhere close to that goal, or are basically in reaching distance of that. So how did you go about saving for your very first home?
So I always talk about this first and foremost. I lived at home with my parents after university for 6-7 years. I'm 28 now. So as soon as I finished uni, I went to uni in Nottingham, came home, and for those 7 years I was living at home. And I'm super lucky and super privileged that whilst I was living at home, I didn't have to contribute financially to anything. So that allowed me to save a lot of money over, it's still quite a long time, 7-8 years, but probably a lot less than other people have to save for. So I acknowledge that situation and that privilege that I was able to do that. I also worked for 5 years in the corporate world. And so for 3 out of those 5 years, I would say at least 50% of my salary was going into my savings and investments, because again, I wasn't contributing to anything at home, and then the rest would be on, going out, holidays, but I wasn't doing anything excessive because I was doing the ACA. So again, half of the time, I didn't have that much of a life or a social life. So 50%-ish would go to my savings and investments. And then 2 of those 5 years, whilst I was working a corporate job, I also then was monetizing social media. So at that point, you then think, okay, I've got 2 solid streams of income at that point, which obviously you're then able to save a much larger chunk of. And so, over the last 7 years, I've been able to save quite a substantial amount, which allowed me to be in a position where I can afford the house deposit that I have.
Yeah. And I appreciate the fact that you touched on the fact that you lived at home, and I really appreciate you sharing and being honest, because I feel like not everyone is on social media. But that being said, I feel like, because I have this conversation with my friends all the time, despite you living at home, that doesn't take away from the fact that you still had to save, because you could have easily lived at home and been blowing it up on like Porsches, Ferraris, going travelling, being Mrs. Worldwide, and you didn't. And I think that also deserves some recognition.
Yeah, I mean, I could have easily just spent everything I made, especially in the corporate world where there is a sort of lifestyle to go out all the time, go for post-work drinks. I live in London, which is extortionately expensive. So you still have to have a sense of budgeting and awareness about your spending, for sure. But I also want to take away the kind of notion that you also you don't need to give up your entire life if you're saving for a property too. So I love having a really balanced life, and I do still get to go on really cool holidays, and I still went out with my friends.
Yeah.
But it's about, you know, always looking at, is there an offer or a deal on something that is, you know, a bit more of an expensive item? Is there a cheaper alternative? Is there a happy hour we can go to?
Yes.
Can I make my coffee at home instead of buying 2 a day in the office? It's little things like that that I think is a real mindset shift, but that really adds up in the long run. And I think I learned that from quite a young age, because both my parents are in finance. I'm also Indian, and I feel like it's a really big part of our culture to save.
Yes.
You get made to feel guilty if you buy anything when you're at home. So I think, it's a part of my mindset, but also the way I've been brought up that has allowed me to get to that point as well.
Yeah. And look, kudos to you, because like I said, there's many of us that want to go on the property ladder. So I think, you know, huge congratulations to the fact that you've been able to achieve
Thank
that.
you.
And I guess, you know, you touched on budgeting, and obviously budgeting is really crucial when it comes to getting onto the property ladder. What tools did you use, if any, did you use to budget or save for your deposit?
Well, I can strip it back to as simple as just having an Excel spreadsheet of saving
you're
goals.
An Excel girl.
I used to be in finance. Okay, I know every single Excel shortcut that exists. But no, both my parents are accountants as well, so I have been taught Excel from a very young age.
I'm unenvious.
Yeah, so I had savings goals just to be like, this is how much I should be saving monthly, this is how much I want to be saving by the end of the year, and constantly checking, not an unhealthy amount, but maybe once a month, just to make sure I'm where I should be. Or if I've had a really expensive month, maybe next month, just knowing in my mind, okay, let's try and cut back slightly.
Yes.
I think always having that as a sort of monthly routine was really helpful. I also always stayed on top of like money saving expert advice of, you know, high interest savings accounts or where I should be investing my money. And so especially the last year, so I actually invested my money with Santander.
Okay.
I had their easy access savings account because I knew that I would need more liquid cash for my deposit, and they were doing a great offer. It was like 5.5% interest, and so that really, really helped to build up my cash flow over the last year. And then also I'll always come back to Notion. I think Notion's a great organisation app and tool for all aspects of life, whether it's finance or just general life organisation. And I'm like such an organisational freak. If you follow me on Instagram,
you'll see with how busy you are.
Yeah, I can't afford to not be organised, but just having it all written down and tracking my budget versus actual was really, really helpful.
Yeah, no, I love that. Definitely Notion, because all my social media girlies talk about Notion. I'm not yet using it. Maybe I should.
Oh, it's so good.
I feel that probably helped me get my ducks in a row. Definitely like reduce the overwhelm. But I guess obviously you've now bought this home and you spent years saving, right? But when did you feel like you were ready to buy a home?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a funny story because I was probably ready at about 24, 25, which is a while ago. And just for context, right, this is when I'm in the prime of my corporate career. I've just qualified as an accountant. You know, I've just taken a huge salary jump. I've moved from one firm to another, shifted into consultancy. You know, I was like, okay, this is where my corporate career is really about to be elevated. And so I was financially in a position to buy a property at that age. But then I kind of looked at the wider factors, one being the fact that I was single and I would be buying by myself. And I had really underestimated the difference of buying alone versus with a partner or a family member. So the amount I would be able to borrow and the type of property I would be able to buy, it wouldn't exactly be somewhere that I'd be delighted to live in or come home to every day.
Yeah, and that's my exact predicament right now.
Right. So, and I kind of thought, look, I can buy and I can be on the property ladder, but then am I just doing it to be on the property ladder and just for the sake of it, or just because it will look cool to family members? Or so I kind of acknowledged and accepted that if I want to live somewhere a little bit nicer, it might take a few more years. Maybe I'll be in a relationship at that point, or I'll just be earning more money, because the hope is that the older you get, you're earning more money. And also, I loved living at home. Like, it's obviously, again, a really lucky position to be in where you have a great relationship with your parents, but they were super liberal. I loved spending time with them. My grandma, who was also late 80s at the time, lived with us. So I actually got some really amazing quality time with her. And these are all reasons why I was like, maybe now isn't the right time, because this family time isn't going to come back. Once I move out, I'm probably not going to move back in. So I decided to just sit on it. And little did I know, you know, fast forward 2 years, I quit my corporate job. I found a boyfriend. My grandma actually passed away. And so loads of factors in my life changed where my circumstances, it just made more sense. And so my boyfriend and I started looking to buy about this time last year, because the property process takes a very long time. It took us about a year, all in all. But we knew at that point we were ready to, you know, take the next step into our relationship. And also, you know, people have different priorities in relationships. For some, it's marriage first. For us, it was buying a home and having something to call ours first. So yeah, last year was really when I was like, okay, this is the right time.
Yeah, and it's so weird having you on the podcast with you saying that, because I'm single. I've mentioned. I feel like I mention this in every single.
Any guys listening to the podcast?
I'm chronically single, and I've been starting the process of just looking at flats within the budget I can buy. And everyone I've spoken to that's older than me has basically said exactly what you've just confirmed, in the fact that I'm single. I do luckily live at home. I would like to think in maybe a few years' time I should sit on it, in the fact that I might be able to buy with a partner. I might have greater earning income, so I can buy something a lot nicer than what I'm currently looking at right now. So it's weird to see maybe your Ola in like a couple years time. I'm manifesting.
Giving you big sissy advice. Yeah, for sure. And I also think it's so easy to get caught up in the fact that when you look around you, everyone's either getting engaged, getting married, having a kid, buying a property. And if you're not quite there yet, it can be quite disheartening, or to be like, no, I need to do this to get there. But actually, you should just do what makes you happy. And if buying a home in a bracket that you can currently afford isn't going to make you happy, or you're doing it just to tick a box, then I think it's really important to remind yourself that, you know, we're all on different journeys and timelines.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with all the advice I've been given this year, I think deep down I know I just need to stay at home. And I think,
and you won't regret it. Like, you'll look back once you've moved out. Like, now I've moved out, I miss like my parents so much. I'm so homesick, which is normal. But I'm so grateful that I spent all the years that I did at home.
No, it's incredible. It's really, really nice to hear. I think I needed to hear that today. So thank you very much for sharing. And I guess obviously the process now of buying a house, for you, it's taken nearly a year. But let's go to the very beginning. What was the house viewing journey like for you?
So the minute we knew we were looking to buy together, we already acknowledged it's not going to be like in 2-3 months. We're, again, like very pragmatic, finance, organised relationship. So it was more to just get an idea of what was on the market, what we could afford, what areas we would be considering, because at the time we both lived an hour apart. So it was do we want to be closer to either side of each other's families or somewhere in the middle? So it was really just like a research process. And so for the first 2-3 months, it was very much just seeing what's out there. And I think that really helped us to then narrow down what we like, what we don't like, how big we want to go, obviously what we can afford. And then we started taking it more and more seriously, to the point where, you know, we had all the notifications on Zoopla, Rightmove. We had all the filters on for like literally the square meter size of the flat we want. And we became more and more fussy. And I think that also really helped to narrow down how many viewings we were going to, because, you know, at first, I'm not going to lie, it was fun and games. And I was like, this is adult life. Like viewing all these properties. But then, you know, it does very quickly get very time consuming and very exhausting, especially when you're both working super hard during the week. You end up dedicating a whole Saturday just to go to viewings and end up not liking anything anyway, or someone's already put an offer in, or etc. So it can be a really long process. I would say at the beginning, be really open-minded, but quickly start to narrow down as to what you like, which will make your viewing journey much easier. And also just let every single estate agent know in the area that you're looking to buy that you're interested in X, Y, and Z, because they'll bring you things that are on the market or right before they come on, and you can get your foot in the door before other people do. And that's what happened with our property. We saw it the day it came on the market because someone rang us and we put an offer in the next day. So, and it wasn't that seamless. We had 2 offers before that rejected. It was quite a long process, but they're just some tips that, you know, when you start your journey to do, that might make it a bit easier.
And I guess that's the difference between where you guys were at and where I'm at now, in terms of I viewed a few properties, but I think because I know deep down I don't feel like my heart's 100% ready to move out. I'm just kind of like, yeah, these are nice, and like, you know, I just see it as like a day out with my mum.
Yeah,
rather
you're
than
not
being-
really in
yeah,
it. But I
rather than
do
being
think
like,
it's still also really beneficial to just have a look and see what's out there, just so you're aware in the back of your mind as to where you could potentially be living or what your future would look like.
obviously now you found your dream home. How did you find the actual journey from the minute you had your offer accepted to getting the keys?
So that was actually a lot more difficult than we anticipated. So to set the scene, we were both living at home, so neither of us were in a rush
Yeah.
to move, but which also meant we were chain free.
Yeah.
And so when you're buying a property, the ideal scenario is that you're chain free, and we were chain free on both sides because we bought a new build property.
Okay.
And so in that case, you could honestly be like completed in under a month.
Yes.
And normally I would say maybe 3 months if it's in a chain. For us, it ended up taking 6 months between when our offer was accepted and when we completed, purely because whilst our solicitor, our broker, everyone on our end was amazing, you can't control the seller's solicitors, the seller's management
see.
company. And so just given the property we had, that I'm not gonna lie, their solicitors were not the best. They took like weeks at a time to reply. It was really, really a stressful process at
Yeah.
that point because
Yeah.
you're just like, what are we waiting for? And we, you know, from December to June, we're basically waiting and waiting for an exchange and completion date. It became, I mean, at March we were like, it's fine. We only want to be moved in before summer. We were pretty
Yes.
chilled, but then we started putting the pressure on in March. We were like, this is
A joke.
yeah, like what is happening? We started following up with emails, phone calls, and maybe if we'd done that 3 months earlier, it would have been quicker. But we ended up having to chase a lot.
Yeah.
So then we ended up completing in June, which, to be honest, was a lot longer than anticipated. But I mean, everything's worked out in the end.
Yeah, 100%. But obviously, because we're not taught about the property buying process in school or at university, which I still think is mind-boggling, because most of us will all buy a home eventually. Was there anything during that process that surprised you?
Everything. And I went into this being like, oh my God, I'm ex-finance.
Yeah.
I know everything about buying a property. And I just didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I knew the end-to-end process, right? But within that, there's like 10 things in between each process, documents, like things you have to sign, things you have to prove, things you have to pay. There are so many fees. Like I know everyone says there's hidden fees and it all adds up, but every little thing is like £300 here, £500 here, solicitor fees, broker fees, you know, surveys, everything adds up. So one thing I would recommend is always have what you think you're going to spend and then adding in a buffer of 5 to 10 grand, because it just really does add up. We also had this stamp duty element where for my boyfriend it's not his first home, so we basically lost all first time buyer privileges, which means our stamp duty was quite a bit higher than what I initially thought it would be. Also the fact that I'm self-employed, so there was so many elements to it where I actually hadn't even been self-employed for a full tax year at that point. And normally they would say you should really have 2 to 3 years worth of accounts when you're applying for a mortgage when you're self-employed. I didn't even really have a full year. So I'd done my tax return, but for 3 out of the 12 months of that tax year, I was still working in corporate because I hadn't quit my job yet. And none of that income can be accounted for in your mortgage. So that's one thing to note, that if you are doing 2 jobs parallel, if you're applying as someone who's self-employed, you can't count any of your employed income.
Interesting.
And so then the figure they take is automatically lower, but also the multiplier they use is generally lower, and also you're higher risk. So at some point along the way, they're cutting your mortgage borrowing capacity even more.
Yeah.
So that's something that I didn't quite realise to that extent as self-employed can affect you. But I went with Halifax in the end and they were great, and they offer a really good rate even if you're self-employed. So that's, at the moment, where we're at now, a great one to go for. But yeah, I learned a lot, and loads of stuff that I thought I knew sort of went out the window. And I think also the emotional turmoil, that's something that no one can really teach you. But as I mentioned, we had 2 offers previously that were rejected, and you know when you think that's a flat, you put an offer and you know you're getting closer to the finish line, and then it gets rejected for whatever reason, and ours were completely valid reasons on both properties, and in hindsight so glad we didn't end up in either of those. And I know everyone says that, so glad, but it's like just getting your hopes up and then having to start from square one, and then it can be quite emotionally draining. And I know a lot of people have had much worse stories, you know, people pulling out at the last minute and things like that. So yeah, it's not an easy process, and emotionally, financially, physically, it takes up a lot of time and energy as well.
But is it a process you would happily go over again to end up where you're at now?
Yes, I'm really lucky because I have a great boyfriend who is so on it when it comes to, you know, booking in the viewings, making sure we're doing like 5 in one day that are super near each other, you know, making sure we're not paying too much in terms of the offers we were putting in, always finding the best rates for our mortgage. And one thing I didn't know is that up until you have completed, you can actually change your mortgage, and the rates were dropping at one point. He actually realised this before our broker did, and he locked us in at the lowest possible rate. I know they're still super high, but he locked us in at a lower rate than what our actual mortgage offer stated before the broker even realised. So you can, if you stay on top of things and track the market, like actually save yourself a lot of money in the long run. So I would do it all again, but also I would definitely only be able to do it again if I was with my boyfriend. But yeah, I would. And now, you know, we're in a beautiful home. We get to come home to each other every day. It's a space that I'm so excited to come home to. I definitely would do it again. It's been worth it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Just making me excited for my future house.
Yeah, once you find the place that you truly do love and ticks all your boxes, which is what we did, it's such an exciting process. And even the emotional turmoil and even seeing that amount of money leave your bank account in one day, it is all worth it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I guess you obviously mentioned fees, and we've covered fees a few times in the podcast, but obviously everyone's home buying journey is very different. So would you mind sharing the fees that you had to pay for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to remember everything off the top of my head, but it would be broker fees first, then solicitor fees, then conveyancing, which surveys, and then in between there's loads of random ones like land registry fees, because ours was a new property, and then obviously you've got your stamp duty, now your mortgage, which also includes ground rent and service charge, council tax, and then now I'm actually obviously having to pay bills. So you've got, you know, water, electricity, broadband. I've definitely missed like important ones, but it's just a lot. So that's just to give you a rough idea of, you know, once you do become a homeowner, there's then a huge amount you're having to pay every month.
Yeah, and do you think, firstly, do you think buying a house was more expensive than you thought it was going to be? And second question, do you think now being a homeowner was more or less expensive than you thought it would be?
Buying the house was more expensive than I thought it would be, and that's for reasons like hidden costs, fees, and the stamp duty being a lot more than I initially calculated. Now I'm living there. It is expensive, but I'll explain why it's not as expensive as I thought it would be, and that is because we, as two individuals in our mid to late 20s, were so conscious of buying somewhere that we could afford, but also not give up our existing lifestyles. And I'm not gonna lie, we love to travel, we love to go to like nice dinners once a month, we like to go out with our friends, so our already monthly costs were not minimal, and we wanted to be on the same page with the fact that we don't really want to compromise on that much of what our already existing lifestyle was. So we've made sure to take on a mortgage and buy a place that is very much within our means. So even though that is quite a bit of money going out every month, I'm in a position where that's not affecting me in any way. You know, I'm not feeling guilty when I'm out with my friends if I want to have a glass of wine. I'm not feeling guilty if I want to pick up those new boots for autumn. And whilst, yes, you do have to make some sacrifices, you can't just spend aimlessly when you have a mortgage. We were really, really sensible with the amount we've taken on. And so it's actually probably less expensive or the same as what I thought it would be now that I'm a homeowner.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you touched on living within your means, right? Because there's a difference between what the mortgage lender will say they can lend you and you feeling comfortable with that amount. So like I mentioned, I did start seeing some properties this year, and I was looking at properties within my budget that my mortgage advisor had given me. When I started working out what the cost of that mortgage would be alongside all the bills I'd have to pay as a single woman living in London, I was like, I don't feel comfortable having this much money being lent to me by the bank. So I think that's a really important topic you touched on. So guys, if you are looking to buy their first home, make sure you are not just listening to how much you can afford, like typically be lent. Actually you want to feel comfortable about how much you are able to pay and not compromise on your lifestyle as well.
And to follow up on that, you know, we didn't use the full mortgage amount and we put a high deposit. So generally, you know, people can put 10% deposits. We put 15%, which also meant that our monthly mortgage payments are lower, especially because rates right now, you know, they're not that favourable. But on top of that, we're actually overpaying our mortgage monthly.
Love that.
So there's a limit to how much you can overpay every year, but we're well within that limit. But also, you know, if we can pay more, then we are going to do that throughout the year, which hopefully in the long run means we're paying less for a shorter period of time.
Yes.
So those are two things you can also do to try and reduce your monthly amount.
Yeah, I think that's really clever. I'm glad you touched on that because, yeah, it's so true. Because interest, like you said, where they're not great at the moment, if you can overpay your mortgage, then you're saving your amount you're paying in interest on the long term.
Yeah.
So I guess to kind of round up, my final question for you, Tanvi, is for any aspiring homeowners listening to the podcast or watching the podcast on YouTube, what tips would you give them?
Don't rush the process because it does take time. And I feel like especially when this is something that could potentially be the most expensive thing you're ever buying in your life, don't rush the process and make sure it's a place that you genuinely love and can see yourself living in. Be open-minded because especially if you're looking to buy in London, the prices of property are extortionate and you might have to compromise on a few things, or maybe it's something that you can do up later. So definitely be open-minded. And lastly, I would say be realistic because this is a huge financial commitment and it's something that will affect your life potentially for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so it's really important that you make the right decisions that are realistic for you and your personal situation, because you don't want to in 20 years be in huge amounts of debt because you tried to stretch yourself too thin in your 20s.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like I said, we were meant to have this conversation today because I feel like you've put some reality back into my journey of wanting to buy a home well, I don't think I was going to buy this year, but I think it's just made me really like reconsider about whether or not it's right to buy property right now. And I think, yeah, I'm glad we had this chat, and hopefully you guys listening have really enjoyed this chat and found it useful, because yeah, you should be so proud of yourself, the fact that you bought this property, you bought it with your boyfriend as well, which I'm just so here for. And obviously I've been following you for a while now. I love the content you share, like I've said. So if anyone would like to check you out or join either of your communities, which you can share more about in a moment, where can they go to find you?
So on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, if you search Tanvi.x, that is where you can find me. I want to get rid of the X, but I can't. And then obviously I have two businesses. One is the Creator Space. So on Instagram, it's at the Creator Space HQ. That is a community for content creators, creatives, anyone in that creative industry that's looking to network, make friends, share knowledge. And then I also am a founder of South Asian Social, which is a community for South Asian women to make friends and just empower one another personally and professionally.
Oh, I love that. So guys, please go check her out because she's amazing. The Creator Space is where I met Tanvi originally. So yeah, please do go check her out. And Tanvi, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Bye.